Be not afraid. Those are the words of the angel as this passage unfolds. I want to talk a little bit this morning about fear, the fear that kind of surrounds this story, this nativity story, as well as the problem with fear sort of short-circuiting our relationship with God. When we're in fear, we have trouble in our relationship with God. It's trouble connecting with God. To get there, I need to tell you a story first. The women from Friendly Service were kind enough to give me a Barnes & Noble Christmas card, a Christmas gift certificate. And so I happened to be up at the Walpole Mall, and this gift certificate was burning a hole in my pocket. So I decided I would go in. There was a book that I wanted to get, so I decided to go into Barnes & Noble and redeem my gift certificate. So I parked a little bit away, and I walked up across the parking lot. They have a little sidewalk that you walk up onto there, and I walked up onto the sidewalk, and just as I was putting my hand on the door, two little girls jumped in front of me and started opening the door. They're about 6 and 8, and their mother was following them, and she was very upset that they had done this, that they had, sort of jumped in front of me. Apparently, there was something they really wanted inside of Barnes & Noble. So the mother said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And the 8-year-old, who was obviously very, very fast on her feet, said, "I'm just holding this door for this old man." So I looked around. I was the only one there. And when I told Elisa the story this week, I don't think I've ever heard her laugh so hard. But underneath the humor of that story is fear. There's fear underneath the humor of that story. And the fear is, if you think about it, is quite obvious. It's the fear of losing one's faculties, of growing old, of being irrelevant, of stepping into the unknown. This fear underneath that story. And this fear is the subtext of this nativity story. It kind of crackles around the edges of this nativity story all the way through, just as fear crackles around our lives. When you think of the nativity story, and you go beyond the manger, we have some fairly troubling things happening on the outside of this story. We have the mad King Herod, who is about to slay the innocents in the town of Bethlehem. We have the fact of traveling at that time. Mary and Joseph traveling from Nazareth to Bethlehem, which was a very dangerous thing to do. Bandits in the hill country. We have the simple fact of birth, which is still something that is fraught with fear, seems fraught with danger. I mean, how many guys here, when they're in the delivery room, almost fainted? Okay, Jack and I are the only sissies. No, I mean, it's an amazing thing when you see that happen. I mean, it is a fearful thing. I mean, it's a wonderful thing, but it's also fearful at the same time. Very much like God appearing. When God appears, it's wonderful and awful. AWE-FUL. Awful at the same time. So we have this fear crackling around the edges of the story. And we have fear crackling around the edges of our own lives. Right now, I'm sure if I could see the thought bubbles coming up over your heads right now, I know there's other things going on in your lives, things that you're worried about. There could be sickness, or there could be, maybe the kids aren't doing as well as they should do. In fact, I saw a thing on Facebook this week. My sister's daughter got into Emerson, and that was the good news. The bad news was she already has her sister, who's only 1 year older than her, in Emerson at the same time. So there's like 100K right on the line at the same time. So the good news and the bad news, and so the fear and the danger. So keep that in mind, that there is danger in this story. And there's a reason why the angel says, be not afraid. Be not afraid. If you go back into the Old Testament, there's this whole series of larger-than-life characters, larger than life in the sense of they're able to go toe-to-toe with God, toe-to-toe with Yahweh. When you think of characters like Abraham and Noah and Moses and Jeremiah and David and Solomon and Isaiah, these are all larger-than-life characters, heroes. And I think as a result of them being heroes, we have trouble putting ourselves into those stories. I mean, does anyone imagine themselves climbing up Mount Sinai to get the Ten Commandments? We can't put ourselves in that story. We can't imagine ourselves as King David. But the real genius of this nativity story is that it happens to ordinary people. It happens to ordinary people, just like you and I. Mary is a teenage Palestinian girl, not much older than some of the young women in our youth group. Joseph is a guy who works with his hands and is in danger of being ostracized because his wife or his betrothed is soon to be found out to be with child. The shepherds, I always feel sorry for the shepherds in the story. They're kind of minding their own business. They're up there in the hills. It's a terrible job being a shepherd back then. It's cold, it's dirty. And they're the ones that get the first blast of this story with the angels singing in the middle of the night. So these ordinary people, we can put ourselves into this story. We can imagine ourselves as these people. In Hollywood and on Broadway, and I'm sure you're wondering how this transition is going to work right now, there is something called a script doctor. You probably don't know who these people are. I don't know who they are. Actually, I do know one script doctor. But script doctors are people who are called in usually toward the end of a production, a film or some sort of a play. And the producers or directors have realized by going through the elements of this production that something is not quite working in the story. There's something that needs to be massaged a little bit or fixed a little bit so that it makes sense, because we want our stories to make sense. We use stories to make meaning. Aaron Sorkin, the fellow who wrote West Wing, was brought in at the very end to fix something that was wrong with Schindler's List. I don't know what that was, but he actually was hired by Steven Spielberg to rewrite something at the very end of Schindler's List, because there was apparently a problem with getting to the end of Schindler's List. In today's story, the angel Gabriel is the script doctor. Without Gabriel in this story, it doesn't make any sense, because Gabriel becomes the intermediary between the divine and the human. It's Gabriel who tells Mary that she will be with child. And those are the sound effects of the child. So Joseph Patrick. So the angel Gabriel is able to perform this function as intermediary, and he has the ability to put Mary in a position where she's able to overcome conflict and, as a result, achieve a kind of transformation. And that's what we want out of our stories. We want to have conflict. We want to have those stories inform some sort of transformation. Mary goes from being a teenage girl to the Magnificat, the most amazing piece of poetry in the New Testament, in one short passage. So, Be not afraid. Be not afraid. Before we know it, it will be January 4th or 5th, whatever that first Monday in January is. We'll all be writing still 2014 on our checks, right? For at least a few weeks after that. This season proves the relativity of time better than anything I can think of. I can't explain Einstein's relativity of time, but all I can do is point to Christmas time and how quickly that goes by. So over the course of these next few days, as we tell this story of the Nativity, which is happening all around us apparently, as we tell the story of the Nativity, keep that in mind, the be not afraid. If you take nothing else out of this Christmas season, it is be not afraid. Because if we're afraid, we can't love. If we're afraid, we can't experience joy. If we're afraid, we can't bring ourselves to be emissaries of peace. We cannot even bring ourselves to hope if we're afraid. So be not afraid. Let us move into silence, and then we will pray.